We're now in the course design, which is the last main part of this application. If we take a look at the application map, you'll see that we've gone into the design area, and we're going to be covering both the course media, course testing, and evaluation in this same screen. We also are going to have a back way of seeing the objectives and the outlines. We'll start out by looking at the tabbed interface where it shows the outlines. Now we've already covered and arranged and organized our text and got the outline together in the order in which they need to be presented. Now this is similar to the portal records where you can scroll through them one at a time and view them and see the information in the order in which we've chosen to present them in the presentation of the course. Now the next thing you want to do as you go down through these is identify what you're going to do next. We've already taken care of the objectives. We've taken a look at the outline, and we've changed over to the objectives where we've taken and stated the objective of each lesson in the sections, and then all the enabling objectives with the information that's supported that was derived from the outline in the order in which it's supposed to be presented. Now we have one thing that's going on here where these may be divided into individual pieces where the enabling objectives may be one or more parts of one terminal objective. Now when we go into the design, what we're doing is we're taking the design and we're looking at these design approaches based on the terminal objectives that we created over here, and we're also looking at the design implementation of the outline. So we're pulling these two together into the design, where now we're looking at what we're trying to do within the process of building the application. The next step that we're working on is to build a lesson guide which takes the pieces and parts of this, and if I go to the portal and show it to you, they're taking the pieces and parts, and this is the approach to the design, which is part of what was created in the objectives and in the analysis and the outline. And now we're taking the terminal objectives and the enabling objectives and we're working through those. One of the things we're going to be doing in that process is then creating what we call the lesson guide. It's going to take the terminal objective, the enabling objective, and the narrative for each lesson that we're going to be teaching, and it's going to put them into a form, what would be the final presentation form. And in this case, I'm reviewing this to show you that I color-coded this using the program menus, where I color-coded the terminal objective and the enabling objectives, and then put the body of the information that was part of the analysis and the outline below that. You still have the ability to edit in here. If you get into this portion of the course, and this is true usually of all courses, once you start getting into this level where you're actually doing the design, that's why we're calling it the design, we're developing the information. Developing meaning broadening it or retaining some of the information while replacing some of the information. The whole intent here is as you're doing each one of these enabling objectives, you're building the narrative that would be in the course. Now what happens with a lesson guide is the lesson guide actually answers some of the Udemy course instructors' questions. Can we build a script? Well, this can be a script. It could be trained in many different ways. Along with that, as you're doing it and putting all this together, you're also addressing, and I'll go back to it, when I go back to the course design, you're addressing the media that's going to be used. And what that is you're looking at each one of the lessons. As you drop them down, you see the lesson number or design number, and then you see the enabling objectives. As you look at each one of the enabling objectives, then you see what you're actually going to be training. You go over here and you see what am I going to I'm going to do a online video. I'm going to do, this is the course, the media title, Udemy instructor, and I'm going to do a video and a narrative. I can also add additional stuff to it if I want to. Maybe I want to do a lab, or I want to do handouts or whatever, but I want to address each one of those within what we're working on that media area. In the portal, when you look at it, you can see how it breaks down. So we're now in the media portal. You can do whatever you need to. For example, media title, or in this case, media how used. we might want to put a handout, a lab, or whatever, and explain a little bit about what's going to go in there as far as those media items. In addition to that, if you have images that are going to go into there, now I just threw something in there just to have something to put into it, but you would have the media image in there as well if you're going to be using those. Now, with each enabling objective, you have the ability to create one of these portal records. You can take it through as far as you need to. When you're going through it in the design, you can create the lesson guide with each enabling objective. You can repeat a design enabling objective in this case and keep going away at it until you cross all of these items off your list as far as that particular set of lessons or lectures. And as you go through this and you're pushing through all the bullet points, or in this case where you actually have the description that is in the lesson guide, what I did is I increased the size of the font to 14 so it's easier to read in the lesson guide. You can go through this and see what you're actually trying to put into the lesson guide. Then you can back over to the other side and look at what the design approach is. You can put a narrative in here that the design approach is based on the outline, the objectives, and then the development within the design screens. The design terminal objectives should be stated as it appears on the Udemy course in the field where you have your section, or your main enabling objective for each enabling objective in the lesson. That's a mouthful, so I don't want to miss that. What I've done is I've colorized the text for the terminal objectives. You can see that as you go down through here. I've highlighted those: terminal objective, enabling objective, and then what goes beyond that. And if you look at the portal, you can see it here in a larger format. This is just about what the lesson guide is going to look like as I'm going through it. Now, I did some narrative ahead of this, and then I actually showed you what I was going to do when I put in the information for the enabling the terminal objective and enabling objective. If you get a regime where you can colorize these in your lesson guide, they're very easy to pick off as far as what they are. Terminal objective being red, enabling objective being blue, and then the actual narrative below that in whatever you're going to put into it. So this gives you the ability to identify the different pieces. It's not going to stop you from, when you're in here, for example, if you wanted to state something with a bullet, to go ahead and add a bullet to it and then make those bullet points as well as what you're speaking. It makes it easier to see them with bullets as you're discussing and putting information into the course manager. So the process is pretty straightforward. As you create these, and then again as you copy stuff, for example, if I want to put this into the actual lesson guide, I can click this, I can highlight. What it does is it actually copies it. I can pop the lesson guide up, I can reach in here and I can hit paste and then paste it right in. And that's basically what I did with this. We created it here and pasted it right into the lesson guide. Now, as a instructor, when you're actually reading this or doing the narrative for your videos or whatever way you're going to present it, you can go back and look at the design here and see that you have the lesson guide. Now, in the lesson guide, there's my terminal objective. There's my enabling objective. There's my narrative. If I wanted to bulletize them, I could do that to make them look clearer to you on the screen. If I wanted to make certain points, or in the way a lesson guide is really derived over the ISD method, is you can actually interject in here with a different color and put show something, or talk about the handout, or go to the lab and present what's going on in the lab as part of an enabling objective. So an enabling objective, say, for example, in this lab we will be covering how to do an ISD systematic approach by developing the design in the following, and then you go ahead and put in the narrative. So you end up with a very succinct piece of information from the terminal objective, enabling objectives, and the narrative, and then you just expand the line as you're going and add that next one in as far as if you want to bulletize it, colorize it, whatever you want to. Now what happens is if you do this, you're going to have something that you can use either on an iPad or on your desktop or your laptop, where you can work with your, for example, I'm using a desktop. I could use this off of my iPad as my narrative screen, and I can announce each thing I'm going to do and read it from the script. So this makes it your final This is your camera ready final information that you're putting in and how you're actually running your course. So like I said, if I go down here and this is a lab and I say, okay, in this lab I want the student to be able to do this and that and this and that, then I would title this as a lab, and I would actually put the lab information in there so that when I came down to that part I say, okay, now in this lab, da da da, and that's what I would be doing. Now let's go on beyond. We looked at the media and we covered that, but let you understand what we're also doing as a part of the ISD process. Every time you have an enabling objective, and the enabling objective being this, there is some narrative tied to it, but what you want to do is test this. If you have an enabling objective, is it accurate? Do you know if it's accurate? When you did your analysis, did you cover everything and purify it so that it is a quality piece of work? One of the things that helps you to do that is you create a testing interface. And what the testing interface does, and I'm going to go to the portal so you can see it, it takes the individual items that are the enabling objectives and you pick them one at a time and you go through and you ask yourself test questions. For example, you can do more, in fact you should do every enabling objective within a lesson within this area. And you should test each one of the enabling objectives with either a multi-choice or a true-false or some other kind of written response type of a question. In the process of doing this, what you're doing is you're verifying that the information can be tested. And you're testing it as a point. You're saying to yourself, if somebody misunderstands something and I'm asking them a question, will they understand the correct response when they see it? For example, if this is about what is the terminal objective used for, and then I come over and say in the terminal objective, TO, is used to organize the analysis outline, that is not correct. If the TO is the section or enabling objective description of the section or lecture task objective, that is correct. And then I would go on to give myself some other misleading questions. One of the things in the process as you're going through testing is you see what people may actually think. And what happens is as you ask questions at the end of your section, you have all the choices you have to have right here because you've tested all of your enabling objectives. You can pick and choose. And again, if you have students that when you're going through, and I'm going to go to that portion, let's go back to the design. If you go back in and now you're looking at the evaluation and say, for example, I picked this and I picked the enabling objective that we had a question on from the individual course, the element that we went through, I can see the information in that particular piece of the course when I highlight it, and that information would come up so I could read it. And then what I do is I state the course question that somebody came in. I used a facto name, John Smith, February 10th, 2015, which is obviously not yet. Why is this important to develop questions for each enabling objective? This is a student supposedly. And as a student, I would evaluate that by looking at, did the student read the information correctly? Ask the student to see what they think about it, what's so important about the enabling objective question. And there is the objective. This is the point. Let's go into the portal so we can see it easier. We need to define what the approach is to come back to the student. Then what we want to do is look at the eval of the outcome. In other words, if this guy has certain things that he wants to have happen, you ask yourself the question, and then you also provide somewhat of the reason for the answer. Then you go in and you actually take and construct the comment. Now what this does is it builds a backflow into your application. So as students are asking questions, you can go back and look at what's going on in your question series and what questions you asked and answered. Plus you can go back and look at your outlines and also your objectives and also your design to see if you really covered it accurately. If you did not cover it accurately, then you need to state it here that you had an issue and why you had the issue. Then you need to go back and correct your course. Maybe you misstated something. That happens. Anybody can do that. We're all human. So with that being thought of, you have a record for each individual objective where there's a question. And now you can go and find those answers as to what people asked and answered and what the outcome of that was and how you answered the questions. This is truly the ISD model at its best. What you're doing is you're really covering the block by answering, asking questions, and evaluating things. Now, an evaluation can actually be done by a questionnaire. If at the end of a course, when people take the course and you want them to evaluate your course, what you want to do is provide an evaluation questionnaire. What did you think of this course? What did you see that was prominent as far as what you learned? What did you find that you had problems with? This is where this all comes together. Udemy instructors ask the question of their students, will you give me 3, 4, 5 stars? Well, why don't you guarantee it? Why don't you test your questions and do your evaluations before you release your course? That way, when you release your course, if you do have issues with your students and you work on that with them and you come out with a comment or an outcome that is preferable for the student to understand, you will eliminate those issues where students do not like your course. If you run into a situation where your course is being questioned extensively, then you need to really take a look at it and say, well, what did I do wrong? Or what did I do right? Or do they really understand what I'm saying? And that is the key part. If they don't understand what you're saying, or they're having problems understanding you, then you need to fix it. That way you will get those 5 stars without even having to ask. Just have a questionnaire that they ask and answer at the end of your course. You can even be really productive by asking the questions that really mean something at the end of each section. And then if you get odd answers or people are asking questions, you ask them, please give your opinion about the question, why you missed it. If they are missing it because it's not presented correctly or the question that you posed to them is too ambiguous for them to answer, then you didn't write the question right, or the materials that you created are not clearly defined. Okay, now obviously I'm going to come back to the question design area, but what I want to point out is in this section, if you do your job and you do it correctly, and you go to your lesson guide when you're presenting it, and you hit all the points, and you don't miss something in the process, and you present it in a coherent and clear manner, you can't help to be but a success. You will be a success. So let's work on that. And I think you'll agree with me from what you're seeing that it takes a little bit more work, but it's worth it to take your course from something that may be not too coherent to something that everybody raves about and gives you 5 stars. Okay? So a lot of people are trying to get evaluations done on the studio for people to look at their media. Now you have the ability to actually sample some of your course in a narrative form and send it to them. If somebody wants to read or write or ask questions about your presentation, then give them the ability to actually see what it is and work with it. Send them something and say, what do you think of this course? The enabling objectives, the narrative, and how I presented it, because this is what I'm doing. This is a lot better than having no standards for checking it, not having any of the question information and all that stuff when you present your course, and just throw it out into the wind and let people look at it and say, oh, well, okay, it's okay. But when they question it or come back to you and ask questions, then you can correct it. I sound like I'm preaching. I'm not really preaching. I'm just trying to be very clear about how you can produce a product that is of golden quality. Okay, that being said, I would like to move on to the next section, and I'm going to be talking about the website, the Udemy website, and how you collect information, and also about the Udemy organization itself. You can go and gather data that will help you and assist you in understanding how to produce quality courses from looking at the Udemy information by their standards and by how they expect you to produce the course that you're supposed to be developing. So let's do that next. Thank you.